first thing, this issue of overthinking, of rumination. And it's something that I've seen a pretty big reaction to whenever I work with guys in the frontline man community around this. It seems to be actually a big problem for a lot of guys where they just ruminate, they just spiral, they just think about things that aren't really useful to them. A lot of times it'll be about, spiraling about something in the past where they will, replay events in their head over and over again. Or they'll go, way back in the past and try and figure out how they could have done things differently. Or, if they have a negative interaction with someone, they'll just go through it over in their mind. So that's one kind of thing where a guy will just replay events, in their life. But then the other kind that I've seen too is where guys will they'll just spiral into their own emotionality. They'll get kind of caught in this pattern where they think that they need just more inner work, right? They think that, I just need to keep trying to figure out my mindset. I got to figure out how to shift this emotion. And they'll go deep into their self-talk and they'll spend hours journaling and things like that. And this is something I found myself in for a while too. And I think it's particularly a trap for the people who are interested in deep self-development work. It's interesting because you study about the power of mindset, and you start seeing how much self-talk improves your life when you improve your self-talk, and it creates this sort of, I think, tendency to just believe that more is better. That's where I was at, when I was really into this kind of stuff, kind of first when I started to get into coaching, and it's I can just coach myself 24/7 in my own head, and I can unlock optimum, performance and all this kind of thing. But what I found is that that's not really how it works. And you end up getting trapped in this scenario where you think that you have the power to make yourself feel amazing at all times if you could just crack this internal code. What I discovered from that is that if you go down that pathway, you just keep trying to make yourself feel good by shifting your thoughts or playing certain things in your mind or whatever, you're actually just going to make your life a lot worse. Because mindset work, and even just going back to the past or whatever, it's a means to an end. If we could reach enlightenment just looking inside of our own head constantly, then we would have no use to actually live. We could just press the right buttons, psychologically speaking, and then we could release a peak experience, and then we would have no incentive to actually go and live. We're not wired like that. We're not wired to be able to fulfill ourselves through inner work. So inner work, that's just a means to get ourselves to take good action. And when we can get ourselves to take good action, guess what? The reward for that is good feelings. If you find yourself spiraling in rumination or just thinking too much about inner work and things like that, my big recommendation to you is to just stop and ask yourself, is this what I want to waste my brainwaves on? Is this what I want to spend my psychological time and energy and intentionality on? A lot of times, if you just ask yourself that question, you realize that I've got a finite amount of conscious awareness per day, and I could spend it on a million different things. Is this thing that I'm thinking about right now actually useful to me? Or am I better off going and doing something? Or am I better off just thinking about something altogether different? Sometimes it's just think less, do more. I'm not saying don't think. Obviously you want to do this, but if you struggle with this kind of work, one of the things that, a guy who is just struggling with this in my frontline man community, I recommended to him is just save all your inner work for one morning session and one evening session where you kind of cap your journaling at 15 minutes. And then, after that, just focus on thinking less. Just try and have love in your heart and then do what you want to do, right? And if you do something, if that's kind of the approach you take, that's going to solve 80% of the internal problems that you're, dealing with anyway, that you create anyways. Just take good action, have good intentions, and then let the chips fall where they may. Would highly recommend anyone who struggles with that kind of stuff to just try and pull back a little bit. Get a little bit. Pull your head out of your own existential butthole. It's not a good place to live, and I know because I've been there. The problem that guys run into, which kind of leads into my next point here, to do this, is that they then worry. They worry that if they don't, look at everything from every angle, then they are missing out on a lot of opportunities. They're leaving growth on the table, or at worst, they're setting themselves up for some kind of disaster. And so they feel I need to think about this stuff. I need to obsessively put this stuff over and over in my mind. This is for the people who tend to ruminate on the future, on what could go wrong, worst case scenarios, all of this kind of stuff. That's a normal thing, right? And I worry that in some cases, the normalization of worry is actually part of the issue. Like, I can't even tell you how many like movies and stuff they talk about. You got the hero, he's on his journey and he's afraid. And they always say, oh, fear is normal. Oh, of course it's normal for you to be afraid. Like, yeah, but it's bravery is when you confront the fear and you still act anyway and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not discounting that fear and worry is a natural process, but I also don't think it's a good one that necessarily we should be embracing. Some people, they even kind of wear it as a badge of honor. You know, sometimes maybe you'll hear like mothers or fathers or whatever, they constantly worrying about their kid, and their kids like, stop worrying about me so much. And they're like, oh, I just worry because I care. And I get that, right? Makes sense. But like me as a Christian, okay, I got to actually look at what does Jesus say, first of all? Okay, so you just Google this. Like I Googled how often does Jesus say, do not worry or do not be afraid or fear not, okay? By some interpretations, like depending on how I guess you translate things or whatever, he says, do not be afraid 365 times throughout the Bible, which is often considered to be like the most repeated like command in the Bible, period, which is kind of crazy. Like we're sitting here saying, oh, being normal and afraid and all that kind of stuff is like a default. You should just like use it or, you know, get used to it or use it as a signal, etc. And Jesus is just like, nah, don't do that. Don't be afraid. If you look at like the saints, which me as a Catholic, I do look at, these people have had major impacts on people's lives. And I find their wisdom very interesting. So it's like, Francis de Sales, he has said that anxiety is the greatest evil that can befall a soul except for sin. So he's saying other than actually doing bad things, one of the worst things that can happen to you is just to be anxious. It makes it sound like it's a choice. And then you got St. John of the Cross, who says, the soul who walks toward God and does not shake off his worries or control his passions is like someone pushing a cart uphill. And it's true, because like when you're constantly afraid or you're worried or you're thinking about how things could go wrong, or maybe not even consciously doing it, but just like allowing a deep-seated anxiety to fester inside of you, it just drains you. It really does. It is like pushing a cart uphill. You know, I've noticed this in my own content creation process. You know, I've made a lot of videos and courses and stuff through the years, and I've spent a lot of hours doing this kind of work. And what I found is like one of the biggest things that has an impact on how long I can work in a focused state and how productive I can be in that state is how worried am I that I'm not going to figure it out, that I'm not going to produce something good. Because anytime I have anxiety or worry about that, I get tense, and then it becomes an uncomfortable process, and it can only last for a little while before I'm like, oh, I'm just getting frustrated and I want to walk away, and, you know, I get creative blocks and all this kind of stuff. But if I just like, don't worry, I let it go, I can go for forever because it's fun. I like it. And, you know, then you got Padre Pio, his famous quotes like, pray, hope, and don't worry. And he says, live in peace and do not be deceived by the devil. As I've reflected on this, and this is kind of lined up with some other personal, you know, intuitions that I've stumbled into lately, is that beginning to treat worry and anxiety almost as like a demonic attack, like a force of evil in my life. Because what I've come to understand is that my level of worry and fear is directly proportionate to my amount of faith. So if I believe that God is good and he's totally going to take care of me, and even if bad things happen, he'll eventually turn them into good things, and that like growth or some other thing that I don't understand yet is going to come of it. Okay, if I fully believe that, you know, and that's at 100, then my worry's at 0. But if my faith is low, you know, I'm starting to doubt God. Like maybe he does just want me to suffer. Maybe he doesn't exist. Maybe he, you know, just allows evil in the world and he kind of gets a kick out of it. Like, I've had some pretty significant pain in my life, and these thoughts, they come up. And as my faith in God's goodness and his providence and his care for me goes down, well, guess what? My worry increases dramatically. And so I think that if you just decide to not worry, and you decide to have faith in a greater scheme, you know, a greater power, however you want to frame it in your mind, then not only is your life going to get better, not only are you going to be able to do more because you have less stress constantly draining you, you're going to be able to have more fun, you're going to be able to do it more fluidly. And the reality is, it's just like there's so little in your life that you can control. You can just like take your actions and then let the chips fall where they may, and then you respond to the next piece. I would just encourage you guys to try that. See what would happen if you lived with 0 worry. When that part of you that inevitably will come up and start screaming and feel anxious and stuff like that, have a little conversation with it. As long as you decide, here's what I want to have happen here, here's what I'm going to try and do, and then you just let the rest go. See what you can do with that.